Have y'all ever thought about starting your own podcast but thought it would be too complicated? If your answer to that question is yes, let me tell you about Anchor. Anchor is the easiest way to start a quality podcast. First of all, it's free. There's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast from any device. And on top of that, Anchor is owned by Spotify, so you have access to a full library of sound effects, background music, transitions, and even full songs that you can add in. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you, and it will hook you up with sponsors so you can make money on your podcast. It's literally everything you could ever need to start a podcast all in one place. Download the free Anchor app today or go to anchor.fm to get started. 3, 2, 1. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. This is the Raw Prospect Podcast. My name is Emmy Nixon. Thank you for listening, and joining me from his house in Austin, Texas, the Stat King himself, Michael Ween. What is up, man?
What's going on? We have a lot to get to today. Today is episode 69. We have not recorded an episode in almost a month. May 19th was our last recording. And I believe that was like right before the playoffs started. That was during the play-in tournament. So we have a lot to get to today. We're going to be addressing our first round takeaways. The first round concluded last week, and we're going to be talking about each of the second round series. So let's just go ahead and get right into it.
Okay. Well, if you're new here, hit the subscribe button, hit that notification bell so you can be notified whenever we make a new podcast. And over the next few months, I might not be in a whole lot of podcasts because I'm going to be doing a summer job. So it might just be Michael doing the podcast, but whatever happens, just make sure you got those notifications on, because you won't know if we post unless you have those. So with all that being said, let's just get right into it. Before we start the first round takeaways, I had a little rant that I wanted to do.
Okay.
So just it'll be nice and quick. It basically derives from when there's a fast break. We've seen this a lot in the playoffs. When there's a steal and there's a run out, guys are fouling rather than letting the fast break happen, which is the smart basketball play. But if the other defenders weren't out in front, normally when they do it, there's already one defender out in front. If that defender wasn't out in front, that would be a clear path foul. So what I think the NBA should do is adjust the clear path foul rules to where that kind of stuff won't happen, because it hurts the product, seeing the foul rather than, the fast break dunk or the and one or whatever. Like, that kind of stuff makes it bogs down the game, makes the game less entertaining. So I think the NBA should really look into that. But that's
I
it
agree.
for my rant.
I actually do agree with that. It's funny that you bring that up, because I had another rant on a rule change another league should make, or is actually in the process of making, but I'm actually going to save it for next episode because it will go along better with what we're going to be talking about next time. So to save time, we're just going to save that for the next recording, and we're going to get into our first round takeaways.
Right. Okay, so I guess we'll start with the Eastern Conference here. Those series were a little bit more swift, to say the least. Most of them 5 games or less. So let's start with that 1-8 matchup. Sixers-Wizards. There's not much to say about this one. So I'll just go ahead and start and say what I need to say. I mean, the Sixers took care of business. They did what they needed to do. One thing I'd say is a takeaway for the Wizards is what are you going to do with Bradley Beal? And what is the question before the season the questions we had about their organization before the season still remain. Like, what is their direction should be their question. Like, are we going to start over and rebuild, or are we going to continue to try to win with the young talent around Bradley Beal? So it'll be interesting to see what they do in the offseason. And then the Sixers, we'll get into them a little bit later when we talk about their second round series with the Hawks. So let's get your thoughts on that.
Well, I'll address it, but I was thinking, I just had like 3 or 4 overall takeaways from the entire first round that I wanted to go through. But if we want to go series by series, we can do that first. In turn, you decide.
I'll just, I won't go series by series. That'll take too long. I'll stick to this. I'll just have a couple things to say about like the important series. Okay. So go ahead and just share yours.
Okay, well, I have 3 like things that I sort of noticed or storylines that I picked out that I want to talk about here from the first round. Now, the first one is we've seen a lot of great draft classes in years past. You had the 2017 draft class with Jason Tatum and Donovan Mitchell, and man, as we'll talk about him a little later. The 2011 draft class with Kawhi Leonard and all those guys. There's been a lot of great draft class in the past decade and over the course of history in the NBA. But this 2018 draft class, I don't know if you noticed this, but I've read a couple stories on this. I think this draft class has the potential to go down as a historically great draft class. Now, I didn't say the greatest or anything, so don't take that out of context. A historically great draft class. You want to talk about the headliners of this draft, Luka Doncic and Trae Young. They'll be forever historically intertwined and talked about together due to the draft night trade that both were involved in. I think some people are saying it's like one of the most even trades we've seen in the past 25 years in the NBA. These 2 guys, I think, along with a couple others, represent like the next generation of superstars in the league. You want to talk about Luka Doncic, and I'm sure you could speak to this. At times in that Clippers series, and I know it had a disappointing finish, especially for you, but he was a one-man wrecking crew for the Mavs, especially on offense at times. And these statistics speak to that. Just his overall stat line, close to 36 points per game, 10.3 assists, close to 8 rebounds per game on 49% shooting from the field. Even better than what he did last year against the Clippers. And then in Game 5 and in Game 7, he put up some fantastic numbers. He put up 46 in Game 7, but all the more impressive, he scored or assisted on the most points ever for any player in a Game 7. I don't have the exact number of points, but that's a fact. And in Game 5, he scored or assisted on the highest percentage of his team's points in NBA playoff history, according to The Ringer. So at times in this series, he was the offense. He was the shot creation for the Mavs, and that just goes without saying. Trae Young has also been very good in his playoff debut, especially against the Knicks. He averaged 29, 10 on 44% from the field. And he's also became the second player in NBA history to score 30 points or more in each of his first 4 playoff road games. So that's very impressive. He's had a couple off nights. He had one tonight and then one last night, or Game 2, which we'll talk about, I guess, a little later. But he's still been incredible so far in these playoffs to get this young Hawks team to where it is right now. And then you look at other players, DeAndre Ayton, who we'll talk about more in depth later. He's been really impressive for the Suns. Also, Michael Porter Jr., I know he struggled as of the past couple games, but you look at his stats and they show, these 2 guys can be all-star caliber players. And then other players, just in this postseason, and this doesn't include players that aren't. Mikal Bridges for the Phoenix Suns, key factor in the Suns' success. Dante DiVincenzo, who I know got hurt and is out for the playoffs, but he was a very big factor in the Bucks' success this season and in that first-round series against the Heat. For the Nets, you have Bruce Brown and Landry Shamet, important role players for the Brooklyn Nets. You have Jaren Jackson Jr., who I know was coming off an injury, and Grayson Allen for the Memphis Grizzlies. Jalen Brunson, the other player drafted by the Mavs in that 2018 class. The list goes on and on. So it's been really impressive. That's a storyline to follow as we move throughout the playoffs, especially for the players remaining. And then I'll be quick with the other two. Obviously, LeBron has been eliminated. I want to talk about the Lakers for a minute. They're heading into another patchwork offseason around LeBron James and Anthony Davis after they got knocked out by the Phoenix Suns. You look at the players they have under contract for next season, and we'll go deeper into discussion once the season concludes about who should they keep and what should happen and this and that. But 5 players under contract for next year. That's LeBron, that's AD, that's KCP, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, Kyle Kuzma, and Marc Gasol, who's on a cheap contract. Didn't look very good in the playoffs, so maybe they could get rid of him. But those are the 5 players that are under contract. And then in terms of free agents, you have 5 unrestricted and 1 restricted free agent. The restricted is Taylor Horton-Tucker, who played well in the playoffs. And then you have the guys that they brought in last offseason who are unrestricted free agents. Dennis Schroeder, Wesley Matthews, Alex Caruso wasn't one of them, but he's an unrestricted free agent. Montrezl Harrell and Andre Drummond. So it's going to be another patchwork offseason. Let's see what LeBron and the front office decide to do. We can talk about that another time, but that's just an interesting storyline to follow moving forward. And then the final thing, I want to talk about the Knicks. The Knicks lost in 5 games in a disappointing series to the Atlanta Hawks. They were a very fun story this year, but they showed their severe offensive limitations in that series against the Hawks. Julius Randle played pretty poorly, but I think the Knicks should buy into him. His numbers were down, his turnovers were up. He had a negative plus-minus in 4 out of the 5 games in that series. Didn't shoot particularly well, 29.8%, 33% from 3, 23 total turnovers. I mean, it just wasn't that good, but I think the Knicks have a bright future moving forward. They should buy into Julius Randle and build around this solid young core. RJ Barrett showed some flashes, averaged about 15 points per game for the series. Emmanuel Quickley, Obi Toppin are players that I do like that can contribute moving forward. You saw Derrick Rose got an MVP vote, which was surprising to many, but I think well-deserved in some respects. So it's just, for a lot of these teams that got knocked out, the Blazers are another one of those teams. They just got rid of Coach Terry Stotts. There are a lot of teams that we'll get into in the offseason, but those are just the storylines or the takeaways that I had from the first round.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Definitely the Lakers one is the one that you look at and you're like, wow, it's them and the Heat that were in the finals last year, and then boom, they're out in the first round. And
right.
In the Heat's case, pretty convincingly as well. And that's one of the storylines that I wanted to mention, is the fact that the Heat really just did not look like themselves. Tyler Hero struggled. I think Duncan Robinson, what he brought to the table last year as a shooter, I think the Bucks really keyed on him a lot better this time. And just the Heat, they just really disappointed. One other storyline, the other one that I just wanted to bring up, I was going to bring up more, but since we're running low on time, I'm just going to bring up my Mavericks.
Okay.
We have a lot to think about this offseason in terms of what we want to do with Porzingis, and also just the players around Luka Doncic. Because the problem right now is the Mavericks lack a variance in skill set in their role players. Like we have a player for defense, we have a player for shooting threes, we have a player for rebounding. I mean, we just need more guys that can do multiple things on the court, play defense, just more all-around players. So if we can address that a little bit in the offseason, I think we'll be moving in the right direction.
Do you know who the free agents are for the Mavs this upcoming offseason?
Josh Richardson has a player option for $12 million that I think he'll most likely exercise, because I don't think he'll be making that on the open market given how he played. And then Tim Hardaway is a free agent as well. But if Josh Richardson were to decline his player option, the Mavericks would actually have a max slot. So you never know. So, and also Luka is eligible for an extension this summer. So
yeah, and I'm sure you saw his comment. It sounds like he's gonna obviously sign that as soon as the Mavericks give it to him, which is fantastic. Keep that guy in Dallas for as long as possible. Because I spoke to him earlier. Just one more question: what do you think they should do with Tim Hardaway?
I think it just depends on the number he wants, because I think he could be a really good fit as a third or fourth guy, which is what he was supposed to be. It's just that Porzingis really struggled in that playoff series. I think if Porzingis can put in some work in the offseason, I think he'll come into next season a lot better. I think people are really underrating the fact that Porzingis hasn't had a season where he went into the offseason healthy in about 4 or 5 years, because last year's offseason didn't even count. I mean, that's 2020. We were all inside. And then 2 years before that was all just his ACL injury recovery. So this is the first time where he's gone into an all-season healthy. So it'll be interesting to see if he can develop. And that's the biggest thing we need. We just need that number 2 to really step up.
Okay, before we move on to the second round series, and obviously we want to keep this to a minimum, but I want to talk about 2 other teams. One is the Blazers in the West, and others in the East, and that's Boston. Let's start with Boston. I read the other day that the relationship between Kemba Walker and the Boston Celtics is, what's the word?
Wavering.
It's wavering, and at this point it might be unrepairable. I think they want to maybe trade him this offseason. I heard rumors that he was actually, and I'm a Spurs fan, of course, he was actually close to being involved in a trade at the trade deadline where LaMarcus Aldridge would have been sent to Boston for Kemba Walker. And I think, that has kind of severed their relationship. And he obviously struggled during the postseason, which probably also factored into this. So that should be an interesting storyline. They'll have Jaylen Brown coming back. I don't know the free agent stories, but I just want to get your overall thoughts on the Celtics, because I don't know, is time running out? I mean, I know they got 2 young players, but they just can't seem to. We also got to talk about Danny Ainge. He's gone now. Brad Stevens has been elevated to the president of basketball operations. They're still looking for a new coach. So just your overall thoughts on the Celtics.
Well, I think, some of their decisions over the past couple of years have been a little bit questionable. And when I say decisions, I mean particularly the decisions that they didn't make, like the trades that were on the table for them that they didn't pull the trigger on. Those are the ones where you have to just kind of look back and just be like, why didn't we do that? So, the Celtics, they're in an interesting spot. I mean, they have the hard part done. They have their superstar and they have their co-star. So now it's just all about building the talent around those two guys. And I don't even think you really need a third max player. I think it'd be more helpful to this team to really build up that bench depth. So
Right.
wherever they send Kemba to, it's going to be important for them to try and limit the amount of money on the books they get in return so they can have some flexibility.
Right. That's going to be important. And then the Blazers, who just fired, or not fired, parted ways with Coach Terry Stotts, who had been there for what seems like forever. Obviously had some success in Portland. They were in the Western Conference Finals just a couple of years ago. But, now you have this Damian Lillard, who, at times in the first round series against the Nuggets, it was like a spiritual experience watching what he was doing. That one particular game where he put up 55 and was hitting incredible shots, hit the shot, sent it to overtime, the shot, to send it to double overtime. It was just absolutely incredible. But, it's just an interesting, I don't know what they're in an interesting spot. So what do you think about the Blazers?
Well, yeah, it's hard to really say what they're going to do because Damian Lillard, if they trade him, what does that say about like stars being able to stay in small markets, because
Right.
he is the poster child of the NBA in terms of loyalty. He is one of the last to really buy into that mentality. So if the Blazers do end up trading him, it's like, if we're not able to keep a star like Damian Lillard, what kind of star are we going to be able to keep? So exactly. I think the fans would just be in complete riot. But
yeah,
that's not
all. I don't think they'll trade him, and I think he still wants to be there. You said it. He might be the most loyal superstar he is the most loyal superstar that we have in the NBA. But I don't know what the situation is with CJ McCollum, but it's obvious to me that if they're going to make noise in the West or get to the finals, that he just can't be your number two. They got to get someone else, a wing player or a dominant big, to, I think, contend in the West. And I think if you're the Blazers, you have to go to Damian Lillard and ask him and get his input on what and I'm sure they will. But it's important that you keep that communication and that relationship going with Lillard. What does he think about this next coaching hire? What does he think about the roster? Who should stay? Who should go? And I don't know their free agent situation, but that just has to be in the cards. Pleasing Damian Lillard going forward. So I didn't really have notes prepared for that. That's just what it is. So let's move on. Let's talk about the semifinals, which are going on as we speak. Do you want to start in the East or the West?
Let's start in the East.
Okay.
We have two pretty interesting series over there that I think are in the process of really shifting. When you talk about the Hawks and the Sixers who just played tonight, the Hawks won game one pretty convincingly until the end. And then game 2 and 3, you saw the Sixers really impose their will defensively the way that we all expected them to. So that series is really, really shifting. So if Atlanta's not able to win this next game at home, then that series might be done.
Yeah, let's talk about that series for a minute. There are a couple things I want to mention. I watched most of the game tonight, and I've watched most of the other games as well. You said it. The thing you can say about this series so far is the Hawks won the first 3 quarters of game 1, and then Phillies won the rest of it. Like, it hasn't been particularly close. Atlanta got off to a big lead in game 1. The Sixers made a run, made it close at the end. Atlanta held on due to their ability to shoot the 3 at an incredible clip. They shot 20 of 47 from three-point range to set a new franchise record for most threes in the playoff game in franchise history in that 128-124 Game 1 win over Philadelphia. But since then, the storyline has been the Hawks' inability to hit three-pointers. In Game 2, they were 11 of 30. That's 36.7%. And a 118-102 loss. And then tonight, they were even worse. 6 for 23, 26% in Game 3. A 16-point loss to the Sixers, where the Sixers just took over the game in the third quarter. You got to give credit to the Sixers as well. They've done a much better job getting contests and guarding those three-pointers to kind of affect some of the Hawks' spacing offensively. Give credit where credit is due to Doc Rivers and whoever has made those adjustments. But if the Hawks want any chance of tying this series and even maybe winning this series, they're going to have to look more like they did in Game 1 because they have the shooters to do it. They have Bogdanovich, Kevin Huerter, Trae Young. They have a lot of ammunition from deep. But if they're not hitting those shots, that affects the spacing. And so I think if they want to get back into the series, because the Sixers, it's obvious they have the best player. That's Joel Embiid by far in this series. He's dominated. And he's playing on a torn meniscus, but it doesn't seem to me that meniscus is bothering him too much, which is good for the Sixers. But if the Hawks want to win this, they're going to have to shoot better from 3 like they did in Game 1. And they're also having difficulty in transition. They only had 6 fast break points tonight. That's not going to do it. Because if you have to score in the half court against this Philadelphia defense with defenders like Joel Embiid, Ben Simmons, Danny Green, all those guys, it's going to be major trouble for their offense. So it all comes down to the Hawks' three-point shooting, their spacing offensively, and then their ability to force turnovers and get out in transition.
Right, exactly. And the interesting thing is, it's just the ability to adjust by Doc Rivers. You got to really give him credit there. It's the fact that he came out in Game 1, he had this game plan where he put Danny Green on Trae Young. And basically in that Game 1, on the possessions where Danny Green guarded Trae Young, Trae had like 21 of his points on like 87% shooting. So really it's just putting Ben Simmons on him. You have one of the best defenders in the NBA. Use him and really make him work to get to his spots, because he's a really small guy.
Right. Another thing that I want to mention that I didn't mention, Danny Green was actually hurt in this game. He left the game early with I think calf strain or something like that. And Doc Rivers said after the game that he probably will not play Game 4, which I believe is on Sunday. So we'll see how that affects things going forward. Hopefully he gets back before too long. But I want to mention the Sixers bench. The Sixers bench also played a big part in this game. They scored 68 points off the bench. Korkmaz stepped up huge in Danny Green's place. He came off the bench, posted 14 points on good efficiency, and he was a game high plus 22 in the plus minus for the Sixers. So that was good. The bench is contributing pretty consistently. And then also, I think we'd be remiss if we didn't mention the model of consistency that has been Tobias Harris. 8 straight games with 19 or more points, 6 straight games with 20 or more points. So he's been very good, especially on the offensive end for the Sixers. So those are just a couple other things that I think we'd be remiss if we didn't mention.
Right. And something about that Doc Rivers system that has always gotten the best out of Tobias Harris. I'm not too sure what it is about it, but it's always with the Clippers, he was almost an all-star. So, but before we move on, in that game 4, for the Hawks to win, what would be your keys to the game for them?
Well, I think I somewhat addressed it already, but obviously you have to knock down a greater clip of your 3-pointers because that affects the spacing. I did like the physicality that they brought in this game 3. I think they should continue that going forward. I didn't like some of the hard fouls on Joel Embiid. I think some of the calls were questionable, but let's not get into that sort of ticky-tack stuff here on the podcast. I think it just comes down to like what I said. Obviously, the loss of DeAndre Hunter isn't helping very much in terms of what he gives you in terms of spacing the floor, attacking on offense, creating his own shot, and then of course guarding out on the perimeter. But I think you gotta work more pick and rolls with Capella and Trae Young, but you're not going to be able to do that unless you start to knock down your 3-pointers. So I think it just comes down to mainly hitting those shots. But I didn't really have. What do you think?
Yeah, I think what they're going to have to do is they're going to have to pick up the pace a little bit. You mentioned earlier they only had 6 fast break points. That's got to go up a lot for them to really be able to score efficiently against this team. Because in the half court, with what they're losing in spacing with Solomon Hill out there instead of DeAndre Hunter or Cam Reddish, that's huge. So you got to try to not be in the half court too much.
Right. Yeah. If Philly has a lot of good defenders, on-ball defenders, Matisse Thybulle is a guy that I look at. Ben Simmons, we obviously know. A lot of those guys, Danny Green, if he comes back, all those guys can guard on ball, multiple positions. So it's going to be hard, actually impossible, if you can't knock down your threes, because then you're forced to play against the set defense. And if you can't get out in transition, the same goes. So I think that's just the bottom line. Trae Young has continued to put up big numbers, but not necessarily in great efficiency. So I think just running more motion offense, getting guys open, better shots, not turning the ball over as much, because you can't do that against a team with Ben Simmons on it. And then knocking down those shots. That's just what it comes down to.
Right. They're gonna need more from John Collins as well.
Yes. Too. Yeah, John Collins and Clint Capella for sure. But
yeah,
I think the last thing I'll say is I think that Nate McMillan is a coach that is capable of making these adjustments and getting the Hawks to play like we think they should going into Game 4, because I think most people would agree that's a must-win game for Atlanta.
Right. It definitely is.
If they want to win this, if they want to have a chance. So we'll see. Let's talk about the other series in the East. That would be the Brooklyn Nets and the Milwaukee Bucks. The Nets lead the series 2-1. They dominated the first 2 games. I mean, it wasn't even close. And then Milwaukee won a grind fest last night by 3 points. Let's talk about the series, and let's talk about that game particularly. A couple things I wanted to mention. Last night, Game 3, Milwaukee won the game by 3, largely due to the big contributions of Giannis and Chris Middleton, who had his best game, maybe at the playoffs, definitely of this series by far. They scored. Giannis scored 33. Chris Middleton scored 35. That's a combined 68 points. That's 79% of Milwaukee's points last night. That's the highest percentage of a team's points scored by a particular duo in NBA playoff history. So they just outperformed the Nets last night. They made a couple more plays at the end than the Brooklyn Nets did. But my prediction is, moving forward, I think the Nets will win the series in 5 or 6 games, max, even without James Harden. They're not going to shoot as poorly as they did last night, I don't think. I mean, you look at a guy like Joe Harris, who's been a marksman pretty much all year. He shot 1 of 11 last night, which he won't shoot that bad again. Kyrie and KD, they had their moments, but they were off. I just think the Nets have too much firepower. That's what it comes down to. Giannis, it's just like I don't know what to say. I mean, he can't hit free throw to save his life. I just think Brooklyn is the better team, and they're playing defense actually in this series. So, I mean, what do you think? I think the loss of, as I mentioned earlier, DiVincenzo has been huge. In that Heat series, they were shooting the lights out, but so far this series, it's not looking too great. But what do you think?
I'll say this: the Milwaukee Bucks infuriate me on offense. Like, I just watch them and just go like, why are you taking that shot? Like, what are you doing? Just Giannis last night almost single-handedly shot them out of that game. I mean, he took a pull-up 3 with 17 on the shot clock when the game was tied at like 76 in the fourth quarter. I mean, it's a lot of really just bad decisions offensively, and they were really lucky to win that game last night. If a couple of those shots go down for the Nets, that they lose that game and they're looking at getting swept. So, I mean, credit to them. They made the plays down the stretch, but one thing I'd say is they really diversified their offensive approach in the regular season. And in the second half, they just diverted back to everything that made them easy to guard in the last few years in the playoffs. Just like straight isolation, and they were basically playing 3-on-5. I mean, with Drew Holiday, Chris Middleton, and Giannis out there, they were just playing 3-on-5 because the other two guys were just standing there. They weren't doing anything. So, I mean, you can't win like that in the playoffs. I mean, they've been really disappointed. I think even with that win last night, even if they end up somehow winning the series, which isn't going to happen, like, I still wouldn't pick them to win anything because of their offense. It's just not good enough.
Right. Yeah, I think the way Brooklyn is approaching this, I mean, I talked about it. Last night, the reason Milwaukee won was because they got a couple late breaks down the stretch. Brooklyn put the ball in the hands of Bruce Brown in one of those late. Nothing against Bruce Brown. He's a very nice player, but you have to get the ball to your best players in those late game situations down the stretch. Bruce Brown took an ill-advised layup, I thought, in one of those possessions in a close game. But that's, aside the point. But for the Nets last night, there was just no flow, at least not on offense, without James Harden like there was in games 1 and game 2. Their stars were outperformed by Giannis. Say what you want about Giannis, and Chris Middleton, but they were outperformed. Just bad shooting nights. KD was 11 of 28 from the floor, his worst playoff shooting night since Game 1 of the 2018 NBA Finals. And I mentioned Joe Harris. He was 1 for 11, 1 from 7 from beyond the three-point arc. I don't think he'll shoot that bad again. And then Kyrie, 9 of 22, only had 1 assist and was kind of invisible down the stretch, which can't happen again. But I think the way the Nets are approaching this is they just have to they can't have the stagnant offense, the bad play of the supporting cast, because KD and Kyrie, I don't really worry too much about them, but the other guys like Joe Harris, just have those guys play better, and I think they'll pretty easily win the series. I mean, Durant, I don't have to say it, but 32.8 points. Actually, I'm reading this article. He's averaged 33 points per game after a loss in the playoffs since 2016, and 37.2 after postseason losses since the start of 2019. So he's going to have a big bounce back game. So will Kyrie. The shots will start falling for the supporting cast, and the Bucks just don't have enough. I mean, you talked about it. Their offense is infuriating to watch. So I don't know what else I can say. I think I'm repeating myself over and over, but
right. And one thing I'll say before we move on is that stretch Katie had where he hit the 2 pull-ups and then he hit that fading 3. Oh my goodness. Just like you just see him do that type of stuff and you're like, this guy might be the best player in the world. Like, I think he legitimately has an argument for being the best player in the world. And I think I think he's by far the best player remaining in the playoffs. I mean, there's an argument for Embiid, maybe, but give me Kevin Durant any day of the week. And what I'm about to say is going to sound really crazy, but part of me low-key doesn't want Harden to come back. Like, I know that sounds awful. Like, I'm not a person that cheers for injuries or anything like that, but I want to see Kevin Durant break a sweat in the playoffs. Like, we haven't seen this guy go through adversity since 2016. I mean, he's one of the best players ever. I just want to see how he responds, knowing that he's under the lights and with his back against the wall.
Yeah, I mean, obviously you don't want to root for injuries, but I get what you're saying. I get where you're coming from.
It's only part of me is
yeah.
I definitely don't want that. Yeah.
One more thing I think we should mention before we move to the West is the status of Milwaukee head coach Mike Budenholzer, who Adrian Wojnarowski, ESPN insider at NBA on ESPN, said this earlier. Quote, if Game 3 was the apex of this series for Milwaukee, I think it's very unlikely and very difficult for them to keep Coach Bud. He has a year left on his deal. They could have extended him earlier this season or in the off season, but they chose not to. They were going to ride this year out. I don't know if he has to come back and win it. If it ends in a thud, it's hard to imagine he's back. End quote. That was from Adrian Wojnarowski earlier today. So if this ends in a thud, like I think it will, and a gentleman's sweep or even a Game 6 loss, we're looking at a pretty decent probability that Mike Budenholzer will no longer be the head coach of the Milwaukee Bucks moving forward. So that's just another storyline to follow.
Right.
There you go.
Yeah, and I mean, if he's gone, he's gone. I mean, he hasn't gotten it done. That's the bottom line. So yeah, I guess that's it with that series.
Like in all sports, it's a it's a results-oriented business.
Right, exactly.
It's what have you done for me lately? And the bottom line is he's had his opportunities and the team hasn't, for whatever reasons, come through.
Right. And I think the shift that has to happen for Milwaukee, I know it's a little bit unrelated, but I think just in general, the shift that has to happen for them is they need to stop pretending that Giannis is LeBron James. Like, he shouldn't be carrying the ball up the floor because that allows the defense to key in on him. And that's the same cycle that's happened the past few years. What he needs to do is he needs to play center. I think they just need to commit to him playing center, and I think a lot of their problems will be alleviated. So, yeah, that's it.
Enough said. Let's move to the West. Let's talk about the Jazz Clippers series, because we do have a game in progress right now, and I'll get you the score of that game while you give me your thoughts on the Jazz Clippers series, which is now Utah Jazz up 2-0. So the Clippers find themselves in another 0-2 hole. So your thoughts on that?
Well, the thing is, really, the fact of the matter is Donovan Mitchell he's having a coming out party as a superstar. I can't help but make the comparison to D Wade a little bit, because D Wade has his moments in the first couple years of his career, but in 2006, that's the year where he came alive, and nobody really saw it coming. 2006 was the year where Dirk was killing it. Like Kobe had a great year in 06, but D Wade, that was his year, and it has a lot of those same feelings watching it live. So obviously the Heat had Shaq in the middle. Utah has Rudy Gobert. It's a very similar type of feeling. And he is no doubt coming out as a superstar.
Yeah. Donovan Mitchell, I think he will. He is, I think, involved in that next group of superstars, superstars, whatever you want to call them. He's part of that group. But in terms of the series, the bottom line for the Clippers is, and it's as simple as this, is their two stars, Kawhi Leonard and Paul George, have underperformed during the first two games, and that's why they're down 2-0. They've been outplayed by Donovan Mitchell and a well-rounded Utah Jazz team. But there's two different problems here. The first is Kawhi Leonard, who's not putting up his normal playoff statistical output during these first two games. He's averaging 22 points per game on 47% from the field, 37.5% from three. So his numbers are down, but he's still putting up numbers on good efficiency. The problem is he's not taking enough shots. And the reason for this is I should mention, the first two games, he's averaged 18 shot attempts per game. And if you look at the opposing side, Donovan Mitchell is averaging about 29.5 shot attempts per game, because the Jazz know Donovan Mitchell is the best player, so you got to get the ball into your best player's hands. So I think moving forward, Kawhi obviously needs to shoot a lot more, because when he does, he still does it on great efficiency, but it's not all his fault. The reason for this is because it's clear to me that the Jazz have made a concerted effort, and credit to Quinn Snyder, whoever, game planned this, to double Kawhi Leonard, get the ball out of his hands, because the other guys can't make shots. And for example, Marcus Morris, another key cog in this Clippers starting lineup, and a key cog to their success. In the first two games, he's 1 of 14 from three-point range. He heated up at the end of that Dallas Mavericks series and played a big part there, but that's not going to cut it. these other guys are going to have to start making their shots. That's the bottom line. Because if not, Kawhi's going to be double teamed, he's going to be triple teamed, and he's not going to be able to do what he needs to do to help this Clippers team win. So the issue is volume for Kawhi. He needs to take more shots, but the other guys need to help him. In terms of Paul George, his issue has been efficiency. He's scoring close to 24 points per game in this series, but he's shooting an abysmal 34% from the field. So he's got to be more efficient, and that's just the bottom line. So the Stars need to perform better, and a lot better for the Clippers to win this series. Now, in terms of defense for Los Angeles, because, slowing down Donovan Mitchell is one story, and I'll get to that in a second. But the Utah Jazz offense, they're a balanced offense. I mean, they have a lot of three-point shooters that can throw it up at the rim. They can go in the paint. They can do pretty much everything. They have a well-rounded lineup, starting and off the bench. But one thing I've noticed is the Jazz have actually thrived in attacking the pick and roll when the Clippers put Zubats in the game. And this was actually a factor in the Mavericks series. When Zubats is in the game, the Clippers during this series in the first two games have an abysmal defensive rating of 120 when he's on the floor. The Jazz have been attacking him in pick and rolls, and he hasn't been able to. He just doesn't have the mobility, the skill to guard those in switches. So that's a problem. And in the Mavs series, it was a problem as well. I mean, the Clippers had a defensive rating, and lower defensive rating is better, of 123.8. Which basically means they were allowing 123.8 points per 100 possessions during the Mavs series when Zubats was on the floor. So I don't know how you correct that. I mean, who do they put in pick and roll coverages? Because it's obviously not working with Zubats. And then finally, I mean, slowing down Donovan Mitchell, you're not going to stop him, but you have to find ways to slow him down. I think the best way the Clippers can do that is by giving Patrick Beverley more minutes, because so far when Beverley's been on the floor in about 20 minutes, the Jazz offensive rating plummets to a season low 84.2 with a minus 13.2 net rating. And I don't think you have to sacrifice the offense and the shot making of Reggie Jackson to play Patrick Beverley more. So just get more defense. I don't know how, but they're going to have to. It comes down to the Stars and fixing this defense, which has been pretty bad so far this series.
Right. To me, for the Clippers, it's three things. It's, as you said, Kawhi's not getting enough shots. So that, for me, that comes down to just role acceptance and just the hierarchy. And then number two is crunch time, just crunch time minutes in general. They are just really struggling to just close out the game. I actually forgot what my third reason was, but let me elaborate a little bit more on the first two reasons here. Basically, just the hierarchy thing, that really comes down to just guys like Marcus Morris and just the guys, the surrounding players, just accepting their roles a little bit more and just feeding their stars more, because there's too many possessions where Kawhi and PG aren't touching the ball at all. And the third reason just came back to me. It's situational awareness. There's always little things where they have this like soft switch or something like that in the pick and roll, to where you're switching Kawhi with Luke Kennard. Like, I don't know why teams have bought into the thing that switching is the all amazing style of defense. Like that only worked with the Warriors because they had the defenders to do it. Like with the Warriors, it was like you're switching Klay Thompson with Andre Iguodala or Draymond Green or another elite defender. Like they had defenders all over that team. So the Clippers going into this switching, it just doesn't make any sense to me. Little things with situational awareness like that has just been really, really awful.
Yeah, and you talked about the late game offense or the crunch time offense. They were actually one of the worst 5 crunch time offenses in the league this year. They were in a group with the Rockets and the Cavaliers, those bottom feeders. So I don't know what it is and why they struggle so much down the stretch, but they got to figure out that pretty quickly if they want to get back in this series. I think now we've seen, Ty Lue's a guy who's been here, done that. So I don't think they're fazed by this. They were just down 0-2 to the Mavericks. So I think they're battle tested and certainly capable of doing this, but there are, as we mentioned, lots of things that need to be cleaned up and fast if they want to get to their first ever Western Conference Finals as a franchise, because they've never been. So is there anything else we need to say about that?
Well, the one last thing I'll say is I underrated Utah's wing defenders. Bogdan Bogdanovic, Joe Ingles, and obviously I knew Royce O'Neal was a really good defender, but I picked Utah to win this series, but in 7 games, because I still thought Paul George and Kawhi would have a huge impact on the games, like a lot more of an impact than what they've been having.
Right.
And especially given the fact that Kawhi was coming off a series where he was just incredible. I thought he would just roll right through to the next series, but that just hasn't been the case.
Exactly.
And you just got to credit the Jazz. I mean, it just goes to show you, like, you can't be number one seed in the West and not be legit. Like that just doesn't happen in the Western Conference. So,
right. And I actually thought, I don't really blame them too much for the game 1 loss, because the Jazz were coming off a week of rest. They had a week to game plan. The Clippers had to travel back and forth between Dallas and LA. They were coming off a hard-fought Game 7. They had to travel to Utah. So there were a lot of factors that I think could have played into that loss in Game 1. And I think a lot of Clippers fans were actually optimistic after that Game 1, because they ended up only losing that game by, I think, 3 points, despite everything that was said about rest and all that, and the Jazz being well rested, that type of thing. But Game 2 was, I think, where, evenly rested, you had more of a chance to adjust, that type of thing, and you still didn't get the job done. So now it's really critical that tomorrow you come out with the correct amount of intensity on both ends of the floor. The stars are engaged, Paul George and Kawhi Leonard. Take more shots, be more efficient, and make sure the supporting cast gets involved. That's just what has to be done. And then try to slow down Donovan Mitchell. But that's easier said than done.
Right, exactly.
Do you think the Jazz are good enough to not only get to the NBA Finals, but to win? What do you think their ceiling is?
I think it's all going to depend on the health of Mike Conley, because I think they really do have a shot. given the level of defense that they play. And also, Rudy Gobert has really committed to stepping up in the pick and roll when needed. Like, he's not a only drop coverage guy anymore. He can,
Right.
like, he's been a little bit more active about being involved on the ball handler more in that pick and roll. So if they're facing a team like the Nets, that's going to be really tough. I don't know how good they match up against them, given the fact that they have their one superstar and then they have their number 2 guy, Conley. But it's just going to have to come down to their defense, whether that holds up.
Yeah. So let's move to the last topic we have, and that's the last series that we need to talk about, the Suns and the Nuggets. But before we do that, this episode is brought to you by Whataburger. No, just kidding.
No free clout.
Update for you. Currently, Game 3 is going on. The Suns are obviously up 2-0 in this series. Update Game 3 with 5 minutes remaining. The Suns are up by 19, 104-85. And it looks dire for the Denver Nuggets. Let's look at the box score real fast. So on the Phoenix side of things, Devin Booker has 26, 6 and 4 on 2 of 7 from 3, 10 out of 20 from the field. Chris Paul has 24, 6 and 6, 8 of 15 shooting, 1 of 2 from 3, 7 of 7 from the line. Ayton has 10 points, 15 rebounds, 4 out of 8 shooting. And then you have Mikal Bridges with 11 points, 1 out of 3 from 3. And then not actually much pretty balanced contribution off the bench. Cam Johnson, Cameron Payne, Torrey Craig, Dario Saric, all in single digits, but all making solid contributions. And then for the Nuggets, Jokic is doing his thing, 28, 18, and 8 assists. Not on great efficiency, actually. 11 of 27 from the field, 1 out of 6 from 3, but still putting up his usual statistical output. But not much else from the starting lineup. Aaron Gordon, only 2 points. Michael Porter Jr., only 9 points. Austin Rivers, only 5 points. Campazzo, only 6 points. Monte Morris had a better game tonight, 19 points off the bench, but not much else from anyone else. So they're about to go down, unless they make a miracle comeback here, 3-0. So let's just get your thoughts on what's been this series so far.
Well, I think the key has just been DeAndre Ayton. The level of defense he's played on Jokic has just been amazing. I mean, the fact that the Suns have a guy that they can put on him and just trust that he can hold up and just leave him on an island and still be able to play great defense on him. Obviously, they're going to bring a double team from time to time, but I mean, DeAndre Ayton was really holding his own and doing it without fouling. That's another big key. He's been very disciplined with his defense. So that's been a huge key. And from there, the Nuggets supporting cast has just crumbled. Will Barton came back into the lineup last game. He came out hot first half and then didn't do much after that. Porter has a tight back. Gordon, you can't really rely on him to create too much. That's just asking him to be his form from Orlando.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. That's just not who he is. So it's not ideal for the Nuggets, the fact that you got an MVP and you go out like this. But, if they were healthy, this would be a lot different. I can tell you that.
I agree. Obviously, losing Jamal Murray doesn't help very much, but I think you hit it right on the head. The key, and we mentioned it in one of our last episodes before the playoffs when we were talking about the Suns and their prospects moving forward. When we did like our Western Conference and Eastern Conference kind of sort of somewhat playoff previews. We didn't have the matchups yet, but we talked about each team in depth, and we said that DeAndre Ayton is going to be the X factor, and he's done it on both sides of the ball. He's averaging a double-double, and as you said, he's done an admirable, if not more than admirable job of defending Nikola Jokic. When he's the primary defender, this doesn't include tonight, but when he's the primary defender coming into tonight on Jokic, Jokic is shooting well below average, 42.3% from the field, 11 out of 26. Again, that doesn't include whatever happened tonight. So, big round of applause to DeAndre Ayton. But in terms of, I think the Nuggets just ran into a team that's, and this might sound cliche, they're brimming with confidence. They're a young team led by two fantastic leaders, I think, in Monty Williams and Chris Paul. The contributions of Paul, despite his little nagging shoulder injury, have been significant. He's leading the way, not necessarily in the box score, but not in terms of like scoring. He's during the Suns' 5-game winning streak, which included the last, whatever it was against the Lakers, and then the past 2 games against the Nuggets. What's soon to be a 6-game winning streak. But during the 5-game winning streak, he had a 53-4 assist to turnover ratio, which is just mind blowing. And during the series prior to tonight, he had a 26-1 assist to turnover ratio, including a 15 assists, no turnover game in game 2. So he's been incredible in more ways than scoring. They've been good defensively. Their bench is contributing. I mentioned the guys earlier. Cam Johnson. Cameron Payne has been huge overall in these playoffs, not just in this series, giving them scoring punch off the bench. Dario Saric, another shooter. They've been good in all areas. Bench scoring. Starting lineup has an incredible net rating. I don't have the exact stats, but I can look it up for you. Defensively, they're knocking down their 3-pointers. They have good spacing. They're just playing well as a team, and there's nothing else to be said. And they're hot right now. They're brimming with confidence. I think they're going to win this series. They're obviously going to go up 3-0. Maybe Denver gets game 4. I think it's probably going to end in a gentleman's sweep back in Phoenix, because that place, oh God, those fans are, that's tough. That's a tough place to play.
Right.
So, and you mentioned it. For the Nuggets, I mean, I'd feel a lot more confident if they were healthy, especially Jamal Murray, but the supporting cast needed to step up tonight. I thought they needed to get both games in Denver if they wanted to have a chance to win, but obviously that's not going to happen. Now they're going to have to win 4 straight. That's not going to happen either. But the supporting cast needs to step up huge if they want to have any shot of taking this 6 or 7 games. Coming into tonight, in the first 2 games of the series, and this doesn't include the entire supporting cast, but Campazzo, Austin Rivers, and Monte Morris were combined 12 out of 45 from 3. That's 26.6%. Not good enough. We're talking about Austin Rivers, a guy who shot over 40% in that Portland series. So just not good enough from the Denver side. And it's disappointing because you have the MVP, Nikola Jokic, and rightfully so. But they're just getting outplayed in pretty much all facets aside from Jokic.
Right. And
that's unfortunate.
Yeah, and the Suns are peaking at the right time.
Yeah.
They're just, I think that winning that Lakers series was the emotional boost they needed to really pick up their level of play, because they have been, I mean,
it was sort of that. Go ahead. Finish.
Right. It was just a switch that they were able to flip Right, and it's a level that we haven't even seen them play in the regular season. Like, this is a whole different level that they're playing at right now. If you think about just since that game 5 against the Lakers, they've had nothing but blowout wins against in all of the games they've played since.
Right.
So they've just been fantastic.
You talk about an emotional boost. Well, a lot of what, it's the playoffs are long, and if you go deep, it gets, tougher and tougher as you go. But I think a lot of this comes down to like psychological factors. It was that sort of psychological factor, I think, that mental hurdle that they need to clear by beating the Lakers, a team that not a whole lot of people. I guess a lot of it depended on the health of Anthony Davis, and we didn't really get to talk about that much. But a lot of people said, well, Phoenix, they're a good young team, but they can't win this series. So I think it was, and whether they heard that or not, I think it was just that mental hurdle of getting past the defending champions and having to win those tough games in Los Angeles. And ever since they stole that game, that first game, or what was it, the second game of that series, they've been off and running. I mean, it's been very impressive. Credit to Monty Williams.
Right, exactly. So that's gonna do it, y'all. One thing I'll say to wrap it up, just about the playoffs in general, is the amount of superstar talent in the NBA has never been this deep. Like, there's superstars all over the NBA now. This level of talent is just unprecedented. I think everybody is, like, all the old heads are freaking out a little bit because the scoring is way up and yada, yada, yada. Nobody plays defense. I mean, the defense isn't as good, but another thing is the shot making is just on a different level. Like, role players hitting pull-up threes in transition, like just little things like that. Those kind of things would just never happen in past eras of basketball. So
yeah, it's been incredible. I think these playoffs have been really fun. Having fans, I texted you this whatever it was a couple nights ago, and I mean, having fans close back to full capacity in arenas, I mean, that's something that I don't think we'll ever take for granted again. It's just made it so much more fun, the environment. But I think we're going to get a good finish to these series, hopefully. And then we're going to get some great Western Conference and Eastern Conference finals matchups, which I'm sure we'll talk about once they come around. But in terms of what's coming up here on the podcast, we're going to try, whether I have to do it solo or if Emmy can do it with me, that'd be great. I'm going to try to do an episode these next couple days. Who knows when it will be. We have some other storylines to get to, NFL and baseball. So we'll talk about those. And then the U.S. Open's coming up, so I don't know what we're going to do for that. We had something planned, but we'll see what happens. There are a lot of things coming up here. And before you know it, we'll be back previewing the football season. So a lot of stuff to watch out for here on the Raw Prospect Podcast. But that's all I have to say.
Right, exactly. So thanks for watching, everyone. If you're interested in supporting the channel on a different level other than just YouTube, we do have a Patreon that we started. The link for that will be in the description. If you're willing to give us a donation, that would be great. But if not, just liking the video, that helps the channel grow. Hit that thumbs up button. And yeah, I mean, if you're here watching, just thank you. It's been a while since we made a podcast, so we won't be expecting that many views for this one because we haven't been around in a while. But yeah, peace out, y'all.
Peace.